Hey fishing friends, welcome back to eFishin. I'm Rodney. Do you like fishing this wake spinnerbait? Did y'all try it out from that last video we had? Well, we had a few people that wanted to know how to make one of these. Well, this is the War Eagle spinnerbait, and it's getting kind of hard to find. So here's mine, the one that I've made, and I've caught a few fish on these, and they work pretty well. So if y'all want to know how to build one of these, hang on. Let's build one. So in order to make this spinnerbait, and this is the War Eagle variety, and these things are getting kind of hard to find, so I've been making a few here lately. And to get started on this, the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need a spinnerbait frame. Now, you can buy frames from places like Barlow's and Lure Parts online, and you know, sometimes you can find them at your local tackle shop. So if you got that, then you're ready to go. But what I like to do is I like to pour my own, and that way I get all the components that I want. So first thing you're going to need is a spinnerbait mold. Now, this isn't a spinnerbait mold. It's actually a jig mold that I've modified to be a spinnerbait mold. Now, why would I do that? I like this head. This Poisontail jig makes a really good spinnerbait. It rolls good, and it does this wake spinnerbait really well too. We're going to use the Poisontail Jig Mold, and we're going to make it. Now, you don't have to do this. You can go buy them already painted and everything, but we're going to start from scratch. We're going to get some lead in the lead pot, and we're going to pour it up, and we're going to build this thing. The components that you're going to need some wire, and this is the wire that I'm using. It's 0.035. It just comes in a stainless steel coil. Now, if you don't want to mess with the coil, you can buy frames like this and use those. They've already got the R-bend, little hook and everything. You just lay that in your mold and you pour it. So for the wire here, all I've got is a 6.5 inch piece of 0.035 wire, and then I've got this right here, a 3/0 mustad spinnerbait hook. The next component on this thing that you're going to need some blades. Now the blades on this thing, well, they're pretty good sized blades. The rear blade is a number 7 Colorado, and the front blade is a number 5 Colorado. And this right here is kind of the combination I like. I like a gold rear blade and a silver front blade. Now the other components that you're going to need some spinnerbait swivels. These are size 2. You're going to need these. These are beads, and they're 3/16, and they're hollow beads. Now I use the hollow beads because they don't add any weight up on the arm of your spinnerbait, so keep that in mind. And I guess really the final piece of the puzzle here is you're going to need some clevises. Now these are size 3. So the other things you're going to need a pair of these. They're round nose pliers, and you're going to use that to either put your R-bend in and put a loop in to hold your spinnerbait swivel on, or you can use one of these, a little blue bender. And this right here puts that R-bend in the wire real easy, and this is what we're going to be using. All right, once we've got our hook and our wire here all fashioned together the way we want it, and we've got our jig mold here, we'll lay this mold down here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our cut off pin in there so we don't have our weed guard fill up with lead. And then we're going to lay our hook in here. And one thing you'll notice is the weight of this wire here will sometimes, it really doesn't allow this hook to lay in there flat. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take another mold, and this is a freestyle jig mold, and we're going to lay this right here beside of our other mold. And one thing you want to do is make sure that these are kind of even here. And then when we lay our hook in here, you can see right here it gives this wire someplace to, well, it supports it and it doesn't let it flop around. And then you can line your hook up and the eye of the hook and your wire and everything, and you can lay it exactly where you want it to go in here. So one thing I like to do is I like to make sure that this hook eye is really in the center of the jig head. Now what this does, it lets that lead completely encapsulate that hook eye. And another thing is to make sure that your the shank of your hook here is in the middle of the cavity. Now if it's off a little bit, say like that right there, right here, you may not get lead completely around the hook. It's no big deal, but you know, it makes it look prettier if the lead's all the way around the hook and you don't have any of the hook showing. So make sure everything is in there where you want it, and then you're going to want to close this thing up, and then you want to look at it and make sure there's no gaps or anything in there, and you're ready to go pour it. So let's go pour it. We've got our spinnerbait here poured in our Poisontail Jig Mold, and let's take a look at it. Now this thing here, it's cooled down. So here we go. Let's open this thing up, see what it looks like. So if we open this thing up, there's our spinnerbait. Now, this right here, here's our pin that we cut off so that we could not have the weed guard poured. Now let's just pull this thing out of here. And there we go. So here we've got our pour, and it looks like it poured pretty well. Now we've got a little overflash here around where the hook eye for the jig would have been, and we've got the spur here. So one thing I will say is if you don't use this pin here in your mold to keep the lead out, here's what happens. You'll have your spinnerbait poured, and your weed guard cavity here will fill up with lead like this. Now that's no big deal if you want to do that and not use the pin. All you've got to do is cut this piece off right here. So when I cut these things off, I like to make sure that I've got them over a cup. I just want to make sure I catch all the lead. So to cut that piece off, just come in here and just cut it off like that. And then there's a sprue. You can just cut that off as well, like so. And then this one didn't have too much flashing around it, but to take care of that, you just take your cutters, just go around the wire like that right there, and it'll clean it up pretty good. So to clean the marks off, I'll just use a file and just file it just a little bit. Again, make sure that you do this over the top of a cup or something so you don't have lead filings going everywhere. And then just clean the bottom of it up just a little bit, kind of like so. And you just keep doing it until you're happy with it. And I think that one right there is pretty good. So we're ready to take this sucker right here, and we're ready to go powder paint it. So let's go back down to the garage and powder paint it. Let's go. Alright, before we powder paint them, one thing I've done here is I've just put some blue painter's tape on this thing, and on the wire, that is, on the wire shaft, and that just keeps paint off of your wire. I mean, you can clean it up afterwards, but this works pretty handy right here. We're going to paint these things up. So all I've got here is some white Protect powder paint. Got a heat gun. I'm going to use this little brush to paint them with. And one thing I like to do is I make sure I do over like a piece of paper or a disposable plate here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to heat my head up on the heat gun, and then I'm going to take my powder paint here and we'll get some on this brush, and then I'm just going to dab it on top of it, kind of like this right here. So y'all see what's going on. We're going to get it going. So one thing you might have to do is you might have to go back and reheat your powder paint up just a little bit just to get it warm. So this takes a little bit, and sometimes it'll cool off. Alright, here we go. Here's our finished deal here. Looks alright. So before you stick it in the toaster oven, I'm just going to take this tape off. We'll let it cool off before I do that. But that's it. That's all you got to do, powder paint these things. Alright, we've got our spinnerbait heads here. We've got a few jigs that we're going to cure. So we're just going to push these in. Alright, they're in there. Alright, we've got them in there. We're just going to turn this on for 20 minutes, and when they get done, we'll go back upstairs and finish this spinnerbait up. Here we go. We've got it painted up, and the next thing we need to do is put some eyeballs on this thing, so that's what we're going to do. So to put these eyes on, I found that the easiest thing to do is to put a drop of this Loctite super glue on there, and that seems to hold them on. There's also a little other something we do to it just to make sure that they stay on, but we'll show you all that here in just a second. Here I got my eyeball. I'm just going to stick that thing on there as carefully as I can. Hope that it comes off in there, and then we're just going to move it to where we want it to. I'm just going to mash down on it, and hopefully that seats it in there where we want it. And there we go. There's our eyeball on it. Now we're just going to do the other side. Just going to put a drop of glue in there. Lay that thing on there. And just mash it in there. And we've got our eyes on our spinnerbait. Now we're going to let this glue dry just a little bit, and then we're going to put something else on these things to help them hold it on there. So the next thing we're going to use is this stuff right here. It's Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails, and that seems to keep those eyes on there pretty well. So we're just going to take that and get some on our brush. Just going to paint that on over the top of our eyes and over the top of our head here, and that's just going to give it another layer on there to hold those things on, because they'll pop off pretty easy unless you've got a top coat like this on it. And I also do the chin here a little bit too, because eventually you're going to have some chips in this powder paint. It all does it. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if it's just airbrushing and epoxy isn't better, but I don't know. This is what we're doing on this one. And there we go. We've got it all painted up. We're going to let this dry, and then we're going to put the R-bend in, so y'all hang on. We've got another step to do. So here we go. We've got our head. We're ready to put the R-bend in it. The Sally Hansen's has dried, and I don't know if you can see there on the wire or not, but we got a little Sharpie mark, and that's about 1 3/4 inches up, and that's where we're going to put our bend end at. So here we go. You can see the mark right there. We're going to lay this thing in here. We're going to put that pin right there, and we're going to make sure everything's level and even. We're just going to pull this thing around and put that R-bend in right like that right there. There we go. We're ready to put the blades and the hardware on, so y'all hang on. Let's put them on. So here's all of our components. We've got a number 5 and a number 7 Colorado blade. We've got a clevis, and we've got 3 beads. Now, remember, we talked about this earlier, but these beads are hollow, and I like to use the hollow beads because they don't put any extra weight on that arm of that spinnerbait. So when you're buying beads, get the hollow ones. At least I do. I don't know if it matters, but that's what I do. If you don't want to do what you want to do. So here we go. So let's take our number 5 blade here, and let's put it on the clevis. And then this is just going to slide on here like this. Now, make sure you put your blade on right. As you can see, I did not do that. So I need to take this thing off and put that on. And we put that on there the correct way, so that thing will spin like that. Now, if you're wondering, I didn't do that on purpose. That was just, that happened, so that's why you need to check. So the next thing is, we're going to slide all 3 of these beads on, like so, right there. Now, we've got our front blade on, our beads. Now we're ready to put the lock loop in this. And what I like to do is I like to bend this down, and I like to start that first bend about right there where the bend of the hook is. That's what I do, and that's how I do it. So there's a video on how I do this lock loop. Y'all go check that out. I'm going to do it off camera because it's kind of a hard thing to do, holding up, showing it on the camera. So y'all go watch this video right here, learn how to do the lock loop, and we will be right back. Alright, there we go. We've got our lock loop on there. It's a little bit of a pain in the hind end to do, but you know, it'll keep your blade on. The fish isn't going to come up there and grab the blade and yank that off without, you know, breaking the swivel, which that happens occasionally. But I haven't really lost any blades since I started doing this, so keep that in mind. So if you don't want to do the lock loop, just take your round nose pliers and just make a loop in it. Stick that thing on there. No big deal. Let's put a skirt on this thing. Got a 1/2 tab of chartreuse here, a full tab of white, and a 1/2 tab of this barbed wire in white. Now you could do any, if you want to do white, do white. If you want to do straight chartreuse, do straight chartreuse. If you want to do a bluegill skirt, that would probably work too, but this is what works for me. So I've got my skirt tool here. We'll start by putting a 1/2 tab of chartreuse on it. I'm going to take my full tab of white, and then I'm going to take my 1/2 tab of this barbed wire. Alright, so then we've got that there, and then all you do is just pull this up in here about halfway, and then you just run your little rubber band here off like that, and you've got a skirt right there. Real easy. First thing I do before I put my skirt on here is I kind of line this thing up, and just to make sure that my little rubber band is good. I think on this one we'll pull it down just a little bit like that right there, and then when I cut these will be just at the end of the hook shank, and then we can cut the other side whenever we get that, just to even everything up. So we've got our skirt here. And I want the chartreuse to be on the bottom. So I'm just going to come in here like so. Get right there. And I'm just going to work this thing up onto the shank here. Like this right here. Alright. So now we're just going to take our skirt and we're going to cut these tabs off. There's our spinnerbait, our WAKE spinnerbait. Kind of a copy of the War Eagle. And here's the War Eagle, and here's mine. They're pretty close. I don't know. Caught fish on both of them, so take that for what it is. This thing works. If y'all like this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Rodney, eFishin. We'll catch y'all out here on the lake next time. We're out.